The incident. Cooper Turner stepped out of the community center, the sunlight cascading down, warming his back as he surveyed the area around him. He had spent the morning immersed in meaningful work, painting walls and planting flowers with volunteers at a charity event he had organized for underprivileged kids in his city. His heart brimmed with pride. He knew he was making a difference. Each stroke of paint, each flower planted, represented hope for a community that had long been neglected. He glanced at his watch, realizing he had to hurry. He had an important meeting with potential investors that could change lives across the city. His usual polished appearance was replaced by a pair of worn jeans and a paint-splattered t-shirt, a stark contrast to the upscale luxury of the hotel where he was due to meet the investors. As he slid into his modest sit-in, he couldn't help but smile at the thought of the lives that could be transformed by the project he envisioned, a revitalization of neighborhoods that had suffered for far too long. The drive to the hotel was quick, his excitement bubbling over with every passing moment. Cooper envisioned families finding affordable housing, children playing in safe parks, and small businesses thriving on revitalized streets. These were the dreams that fueled his work, and he was determined to make them a reality. As he parked and stepped out, Cooper took a deep breath, savoring the crisp air that filled his lungs. The hotel's grand entrance loomed before him, its polished doors reflecting the afternoon sun like a beacon of opportunity. But his arrival did not go unnoticed. Officer Henry West, a patrol officer who had been monitoring the area, eyed Cooper with growing suspicion. West's mind raced as he assessed the situation. A man dressed casually arriving at a luxury hotel. Something didn't sit right with him. Without hesitation, he approached Cooper, hand resting on his belt. "Hey you," he called out, his voice sharp and authoritative. Cooper turned, surprised by the sudden confrontation. "Good afternoon, officer. I'm here for a meeting with some investors," he replied, attempting to diffuse the tension with a smile. But West wasn't having it. His eyes scanned Cooper from head to toe, disbelief evident on his face. "A meeting? Dressed like that? I don't think so. Let me see some ID." Cooper's heart sank as he processed the unfolding scene. "Of course, officer," he said calmly, reaching for his wallet. "I can explain. Hands where I can see them." West barked, his hand moving towards his holster. The panic set in, and Cooper froze, raising his hands in the air. "Please, officer. There's no need for this. I'm just here for a meeting." But West had already made up his mind. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back. You're under arrest for suspicious activity and possible trespassing." Cooper's mind raced. "Sir, I'm not trespassing. I'm a guest here. If you just let me explain." West grabbed Cooper's arm roughly, spinning him around. "I said hands behind your back," he growled, slapping handcuffs on Cooper's wrists. The cold metal bit into his skin as West tightened them, and the shocked gasps from onlookers pierced through Cooper's sense of disbelief. "Please," Cooper implored, his voice steady despite the panic rising within him. "Check with the hotel. They're expecting me. My name is Cooper Turner." West ignored him, shoving Cooper toward his patrol car. "Save it for the station," he snapped, a mix of anger and disdain tainting his voice. Just then, Cooper caught sight of the hotel entrance. The investors he was meant to meet were arriving, their expressions a blend of confusion and concern as they witnessed the unfolding drama. As he took deep breaths to calm himself, he felt the sting of humiliation wash over him. Suddenly, a sleek black car screeched to a halt nearby. Out jumped Rita, Cooper's assistant, her face etched with worry. Behind her stood Michael, Cooper's lawyer, a tall man in a sharp suit. "What's going on here?" Michael demanded, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. Officer West turned, his annoyance palpable. "This is police business. Step back." Rita was already on her phone, dialing frantically. "Mr. Jameson, it's Rita. We have an emergency at the front entrance." Moments later, the hotel's grand doors burst open, and a portly man in an expensive suit rushed out, his face flushed with panic. It was Mr. Jameson, the hotel manager. "Officer, wait," he called out, slightly out of breath. "There's been a terrible mistake." West's furrowed brows showed his confusion. "What are you talking about?" Mr. Jameson gestured wildly towards Cooper, still handcuffed in the police car. "That man you've arrested. That's Cooper Turner. He's one of our most valued guests, a prominent businessman here for an important meeting." The color drained from West's face as the reality of his mistake began to sink in. He glanced at the crowd, their phones still recording, and then back at Cooper, who was now being freed from the handcuffs. "Mr. Turner," West stammered, his demeanor shifting as the handcuffs were removed. Cooper rubbed his wrists, the skin red and chafed, and stepped out of the car, legs slightly shaky from the ordeal. Rita rushed to his side, eyes brimming with concern. "Mr. Turner, are you all right?" Cooper nodded, but his eyes told a different story. The sting of public humiliation burned deep within him, and the familiar pain of racial profiling twisted in his gut like a knife. Mr. Jameson approached, distress written all over his face. "Mr. Turner, I cannot begin to express how sorry we are for this outrageous incident. Please, let us make this right." But Cooper barely heard him. His gaze was fixed on a crowd, their phones still raised, still recording. He saw the mix of pity and shock in their eyes, and it made his chest tighten. "Officer West," Cooper finally addressed, his voice low but steady. "A misunderstanding, officer. Is that what we're calling it?" The weight of those words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken accusation. West shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet Cooper's gaze as the crowd began to disperse. Cooper straightened his shoulders, trying to reclaim some dignity, but he felt as though he was walking through a haze. The memory of the cold metal on his wrists and being shoved into a police car in front of gawking strangers clung to him like a shadow. 3 minutes later, as Cooper tried to collect himself, his phone buzzed incessantly. News of the incident was spreading like wildfire across social media platforms. Video clips of his arrest were being shared, commented on, and reposted at an alarming rate. Inside the hotel, Mr. Jameson frantically dialed the police department's public relations office. "This is a disaster," he muttered, pacing back and forth. "We need to get ahead of this story before it spirals out of control." Meanwhile, at the police station, Captain Melinda Ramirez's office phone rang nonstop. She answered call after call, her face growing more concerned with each passing minute. "Yes, I understand the severity of the situation," she said, her voice tense. "We're addressing it immediately." As she hung up the phone, her assistant burst in. "Captain, have you seen the videos? It's all over Twitter and Facebook. People are calling it a clear case of racial profiling." Captain Ramirez rubbed her temples, feeling a headache coming on. "Get Officer West in here now." When West entered her office, she didn't mince words. "Do you have any idea what you've done? This isn't just about you anymore. Your actions have put the entire department under scrutiny." West shifted uncomfortably. "Captain, I was just following protocol." "Protocol?" she interrupted, her voice rising. "Since when is it protocol to arrest a man without probable cause, to ignore his explanations, and manhandle him in front of dozens of witnesses?" She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "Officer West, your behavior was not only unprofessional but potentially illegal. I have no choice but to suspend you effective immediately." West's face paled. "Suspended? For how long?" 3 months without pay," Captain Ramirez replied firmly. "And consider yourself lucky it's not worse. Now get out of my sight." As West left, shoulders slumped, the captain turned to her assistant. "Draft a press release. We need to make it clear that we do not condone this kind of behavior and that we're taking immediate action." Back at the hotel, Cooper sat in a quiet corner of the lobby, surrounded by his lawyer and assistant. His phone continued to buzz with messages of support and outrage from friends, family, and even strangers who had seen the videos. "Cooper, Rita said gently, "What do you want to do?" "The media is asking for statements. People are calling for protests." Cooper looked up, his eyes filled with a mix of pain and determination. "This isn't just about me," he said quietly. "This happens to people who don't have my resources, my connections every single day. We need to do something that will make a real difference." He paused, his mind racing with possibilities. "We need to create change that lasts. That goes beyond just one incident or one officer. Something that will hold the entire system accountable." As Cooper spoke, the seed of an idea began to form in his mind. He didn't want revenge or mere punishment. He wanted transformation. A way to ensure that what happened to him wouldn't happen to anyone else. Cooper sat in the hotel's private conference room, surrounded by his closest advisors and legal team. The air was thick with tension, but Cooper's eyes burned with determination. He leaned forward, hands clasped tightly on the polished table. "What happened today isn't just about me," Cooper began, his voice steady despite the emotion behind his words. "It's about every person who's ever been wrongly judged, every life that's been changed by a moment of prejudice." Rita nodded solemnly. "The public is outraged, Cooper. They're calling for protests, boycotts. What do you want to do?" Cooper took a deep breath. "A lawsuit won't fix this. Neither will a public apology. We need to hit them where it really hurts." His legal advisor, James, raised an eyebrow. "What are you thinking?" "Our investments," Cooper said, his voice gaining strength. "We've poured millions into the city's projects, schools, hospitals, community centers. What if we pulled it all out?" The room fell silent, and then slowly understanding dawned on their faces. "It's a bold move," Rita said, her eyes wide. "But it could work. The city relies heavily on your investments." James nodded, flipping through papers. "Legally, we can do it, but the fallout would be massive." Cooper stood up, pacing the room. "That's exactly the point. This isn't about revenge, it's about leverage. We'll use our financial power to force real, lasting change." He turned to face his team, his expression resolute. "We'll draft a list of demands: police reform, racial sensitivity training, community oversight boards, and we won't reinvest until we see concrete action." The room buzzed with energy as Cooper's team began to work, mapping out strategies and crunching numbers. They knew the road ahead would be challenging, but they were ready to fight for justice. As the meeting progressed, Cooper felt a mix of emotions. There was anger at what had happened, determination to make a difference, and a deep sense of responsibility. He knew his actions would affect many lives, but he also knew that sometimes real change required bold moves. "This is bigger than just one incident," Cooper said, looking at each person in the room. "We have the power to make a real difference. Let's use it." The fallout. As the days passed following Cooper Turner's arrest, the fallout from that fateful encounter began to ripple through the community and the police department alike. Social media buzzed with outrage and disbelief, with video clips of the incident garnering millions of views. Comments flooded in from citizens expressing their solidarity with Cooper and condemning Officer Henry West's actions. Hashtags like #JusticeForCooper and #IndRacial Profiling began trending, capturing the attention of local activists and national news outlets. Cooper, still reeling from the emotional trauma of being publicly humiliated, spent the first few days after the incident in a whirlwind of media requests, community meetings, and strategy sessions with his legal team. The urgency to address the injustice he faced was palpable, and he was determined to turn his anger into action. At the heart of the media storm, Cooper became a reluctant symbol of resilience against systemic injustice. He found himself thrust into the spotlight, sharing his story on television interviews, podcasts, and in front of live audiences, each time reiterating that his fight was not just for himself, but for countless others who had been victimized by a flawed system. In one such interview, sitting across from a renowned journalist, Cooper articulated his vision for change. "What happened to me isn't an isolated incident. It's a part of a much larger problem. Racial profiling is a systemic issue that affects people every day, people who don't have the resources to fight back. He stated firmly, his voice steady yet passionate. The journalist nodded, clearly moved. "What do you hope to achieve, Cooper?" "I want to create a movement," he replied. "I want to hold those in power accountable, not just for my case, but for every case that goes unreported. We need comprehensive reforms in our police departments, real changes that make our communities safer for everyone, regardless of their background." His words resonated with many viewers, sparking conversations in homes and community centers across the city. Town halls were organized, rallies planned, and petitions circulated, all calling for police reform and increased accountability. Community leaders, inspired by Cooper's courage, began to mobilize, uniting people from various backgrounds under a common goal: justice and equality. Meanwhile, in the shadows of this burgeoning movement, Officer Henry West simmered with resentment. The suspension had stripped him of his badge and authority, and the public outcry only deepened his frustration. He couldn't comprehend how a mere millionaire, who he believed had no understanding of the struggles faced by law enforcement, could append everything he had worked for. In his mind, Cooper was not a hero. He was a threat to the very foundation of law and order. West spent sleepless nights scrolling through social media, reading the comments that branded him a racist and a villain. He felt isolated from his colleagues, who seemed to turn their backs on him as the department scrambled to distance itself from the controversy. The internal pressure mounted, leading West to seek solace in clandestine meetings with a few like-minded officers who shared his disdain for the unfolding events. "Look, we all know that what happened to Turner was a mistake, but we can't let this billionaire dictate how we do our jobs," West argued passionately during one meeting at a dimly lit diner. "If we don't push back, we're going to lose everything we've worked for. We're the ones protecting this city." His fellow officers exchanged uncertain glances, some nodding in agreement, but others hesitating. They understood West's frustrations. The job had become increasingly complicated under the weight of public scrutiny and calls for reform. But not everyone was convinced that confrontation was the answer. "Henry, we have to think about our careers here," Officer Johnson said carefully, trying to keep the peace. "Pushing back against the public and the city isn't going to help us. We need to find a way to work within the system." West shook his head vehemently. "No, we need to send a message. If we don't stand up for ourselves now, we might as well hang our badges up for good." As the meeting wore on, it became clear that West's discontent was festering into a more dangerous sentiment. He began discussing ways to undermine Cooper's movement, subtle tactics to discourage community members from using the app he was developing, and discrediting the testimonies collected by its users. "Let's create doubt," he proposed, leaning in close to his audience. "If we can make people think that the app is flawed or that it's only being used by criminals trying to avoid accountability, we can shift the narrative." While West plotted in the shadows, Cooper's momentum continued to grow. His app, which would allow citizens to document interactions with law enforcement, was gaining traction. Cooper collaborated with tech experts and civil rights activists, focusing on creating a user-friendly interface that ensured privacy and security. "Transparency is the goal," Cooper explained during a community workshop. "This app is designed to empower people, giving them a voice and a record of their experiences. It's not about being anti-police, it's about holding everyone accountable." Community members listened intently, sharing their own stories of racial profiling and police encounters that had left them feeling powerless. Cooper encouraged them to envision a future where their voices mattered, where their experiences were documented and validated. The energy in the room was palpable, igniting a sense of hope that had long been absent. One evening, as Cooper sat in his office reviewing app designs, he received a call from a community organizer named Melissa Santos, a prominent civil rights attorney. "Cooper, I just wanted to let you know how inspired people are by what you're doing," she said, her voice warm with enthusiasm. "This app could really change the way we interact with law enforcement. You're leading a movement, and people are rallying behind you." Cooper smiled, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Thank you, Melissa, but we still have a long way to go. We need to keep the pressure on the city to implement real reforms. The app is just the beginning." As Cooper's resolve strengthened, the city buzzed with anticipation. The mayor's office felt the mounting pressure as citizens demanded a response to Cooper's initiatives. Meetings were held, statements drafted, and discussions of police reform took center stage in local news. For the first time in years, people felt that their voices were being heard, that they had the power to influence change. In the midst of this whirlwind, Cooper maintained his focus on the goals he had set: to create lasting change that would not only protect individuals, but also rebuild trust between communities and law enforcement. He often reminded his team that this was not just about him. It was about the countless lives affected by systemic injustice. But with each passing day, as Cooper's movement gained traction, Officer Henry West plodded further, driven by a fierce sense of betrayal and anger. He could no longer sit idly by. He needed to act. The more the city rallied behind Cooper, the more West felt compelled to prove that he and his fellow officers were not the enemies, but the protectors of the community. The divide was deepening, and it was only a matter of time before their paths would cross again. As Cooper rallied support for his movement, the police department braced for the storm brewing just beneath the surface, a conflict that would challenge the very fabric of justice in their city. The fight for justice was just beginning, and both Cooper and West were determined to defend their beliefs, even if it meant clashing in a battle that would reverberate throughout the community. In the heart of the city, the stakes had never been higher, and the outcome remained uncertain. The rising tensions. As the weeks unfolded, the tension between Cooper Turner's movement for justice and Officer Henry West's simmering resentment reached a boiling point. The city was alive with discussions about race, policing, and accountability, and Cooper found himself at the center of it all. Each rally and community meeting only fueled his determination to see real change enacted. Cooper had become something of a local hero, a figurehead for a movement that sought to reshape the narrative surrounding law enforcement and marginalized communities. His app, now officially named Justice Track, had gained thousands of downloads within weeks, with users sharing their experiences and concerns at an unprecedented rate. For Cooper, this was validation, proof that the community was ready for change. One afternoon, as Cooper reviewed feedback from early users of Justice Track, his phone buzzed with a text from Rita, his assistant. "Meeting with the mayor's office today at 3 p.m. Important discussions about police reform." He quickly responded, a mix of excitement and anxiety coursing through him. The upcoming meeting represented a potential breakthrough in their fight, but Cooper was also aware of the challenges they faced in convincing those in power to make substantial changes. When Cooper arrived at the mayor's office, the atmosphere was charged. Activists, community leaders, and representatives from various organizations filled the conference room, each of them eager to present their demands and concerns. As he took his seat, he scanned the room, recognizing several familiar faces who had rallied alongside him. Mayor Thompson, a charismatic leader known for her ability to connect with her constituents, welcomed everyone with a warm smile. "Thank you all for being here today. We are facing a critical moment in our city's history. The events surrounding Cooper's arrest have opened our eyes to the need for reform, and it's time we take action." Cooper felt a swell of hope as he listened to her words. It's not just about policy changes, but about rebuilding trust with our community. He spoke up, his voice steady. "The Justice Track app is just one tool in this fight. We need to ensure that our police officers are trained in cultural sensitivity and are held accountable for their actions." The room buzzed with agreement, and community leaders shared their testimonies. Stories of fear, of mistrust, and of the daily realities faced by those in marginalized communities. Together, they outlined a comprehensive set of demands: mandatory training for police officers on racial bias, community oversight boards to ensure accountability, and a commitment to transparency in law enforcement practices. As discussions progressed, a small group of officers sat at the back of the room, their expressions ranging from skeptical to outright hostile. Among them was Officer West, who had been tipped off about the meeting by a colleague. He crossed his arms, his face a mask of defiance, as he listened to the demands being made. "This is ridiculous," he whispered to another officer, glancing at Cooper, who was passionately advocating for change. "They're treating us like we're the enemy." The other officer, unsure of how to respond, shrugged. "But something needs to change, Henry. This can't keep happening." West shook his head vehemently. "Change doesn't come from attacking good officers. We do our jobs every day to protect the public. They don't see that." The meeting concluded with a promise from Mayor Thompson to take the proposed reforms into serious consideration. As attendees filed out, Cooper felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were making strides, but the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges. Later that evening, Cooper hosted a community forum in a local church, inviting residents to discuss the day's events and share their thoughts on the next steps. The atmosphere was electric, with people eager to voice their opinions and brainstorm ideas. Cooper stood at the front, listening intently as community members spoke about their experiences with the police and the changes they wanted to see. "I've had my own run-ins with the police," one woman shared, her voice trembling with emotion. "Every time, I felt powerless. This app could help us document what happens and finally give us a voice." Another resident chimed in, "But we need to ensure that the police understand we're not trying to attack them. We just want to be treated with respect." As discussions unfolded, Cooper encouraged everyone to brainstorm ways to raise awareness about Justice Track and engage more citizens in the movement. Ideas flowed freely, ranging from social media campaigns to organizing workshops on how to use the app effectively. However, as the excitement built, Cooper remained acutely aware of the undercurrents of dissent represented by Officer West and his allies. He knew that not everyone viewed this movement as a force for good, and that reality weighed heavily on his mind. Meanwhile, Officer West continued to organize in secret. He met with officers who were disillusioned with Cooper's rising influence and the potential reforms being proposed. They discussed strategies for undermining the movement, sowing doubt in the community about the efficacy and integrity of Justice Track. "We need to show them that not all of us are bad," West asserted during one late-night meeting. "If they think we're just going to accept being bullied by a millionaire and his app, they're sorely mistaken." His words ignited a fire among the officers. "What if we start collecting our own data? Something that counters the narrative they're pushing," one officer suggested. West's eyes lit up. "Exactly. If we can create our own reports, show that crime rates are down, and that we're doing our jobs, we can fight back. We need to expose the flaws in Turner's claims." As the tension between Cooper's movement and West's faction intensified, Cooper began to receive anonymous threats online. His social media accounts filled with hateful comments and aggressive messages, all aimed at discrediting his character and intentions. "Who does he think he is?" One post read, "Just another rich guy trying to buy his way into politics. He doesn't care about the community." Initially shaken, Cooper found strength in the overwhelming support he received from his allies and community members. They rallied around him, reminding him that his mission was bigger than any personal attack. He turned the negativity into fuel, determined to press on with his vision for Justice Track. One evening, after a particularly long day filled with meetings and community outreach, Cooper sat down with Rita and Michael to strategize the next phase of their campaign. "We need to amplify our message and ensure that everyone knows what we're trying to achieve," Cooper stated, rubbing his temples. Rita nodded in agreement. "What about organizing a major rally? We could invite local leaders, influencers, and community members to show solidarity. Make it clear that we are united in our fight for justice." Michael leaned forward, his brow furrowed in thought. "A rally could work, but we need to ensure it's safe. The last thing we want is for tensions to escalate. We need to engage the police department as well. Show them that we want collaboration, not confrontation." Cooper's eyes gleamed with determination. Absolutely. Let's reach out to the mayor's office and see if they can help facilitate a meeting with the police department to ensure they're on board. The plan took shape quickly, and soon the community was abuzz with news of the upcoming rally. Flyers were distributed, social media posts went viral, and local news outlets began covering the event as it garnered attention from both supporters and detractors. As the date approached, Officer West's frustration mounted. He felt cornered and desperate to regain control over the narrative. With a group of fellow officers, he plotted to attend the rally, hoping to disrupt it and send a message that would resonate within the community. "This is our city too," West said, his voice tinged with anger. "We're not going to sit back and let Turner turn this into a circus. We'll show them what happens when you push too far." The stage was set for an inevitable clash between Cooper's pursuit of justice and West's vehement resistance to change. Both sides prepared for the confrontation that lay ahead, unaware of just how profound the impact of their actions would be. In the heart of the city, with emotions running high and the community at a crossroads, the rally promised to be a pivotal moment, a reckoning that would shape the future of their city. As Cooper geared up for what he hoped would be a celebration of unity and progress, West strategized for a display of defiance, each side believing they were fighting for what was right. The stakes had never been higher, and the tension in the air was palpable as the day of the rally drew near. Would it be a turning point for justice and accountability, or would it ignite a deeper conflict that threatened to unravel everything they had fought for? Only time would tell. The rally. The day of the rally dawned bright and clear, the sun shining down on the city as Cooper Turner stood at the heart of a bustling park, surrounded by supporters and community members. Banners adorned with slogans like "Justice for All" and "Accountability" now fluttered in the gentle breeze, a vibrant display of unity and determination. This was a moment Cooper had envisioned, an opportunity for the community to come together and demand change. As the crowd grew, so did the energy. People from all walks of life gathered, united by a shared purpose. Families, activists, business owners, and local leaders exchanged stories and hugs, each one excited to be part of something greater. Cooper felt a surge of hope as he surveyed the crowd. This was more than just a rally. It was a movement, a call for justice that resonated deeply with everyone present. Cooper stepped onto the makeshift stage, his heart racing. The cheers that erupted from the crowd filled him with both excitement and responsibility. He had prepared himself for this moment, knowing that his words would carry weight. Taking a deep breath, he raised his hand for silence, allowing the crowd to settle before he spoke. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice steady. "We gather not just to protest, but to stand united in our demand for justice and accountability in our police force. What happened to me is not just a personal injustice. It's a reflection of a broken system that needs repair." The crowd erupted in applause, and Cooper felt a rush of determination wash over him. "Today, we are here to say enough is enough. We are not just victims. We are advocates for change. Together, we will hold our leaders accountable, and we will ensure that our voices are heard." As Cooper continued, the atmosphere shifted from one of mere protest to one of empowerment. He spoke of the importance of community involvement, urging everyone to share their stories and experiences, to document instances of injustice, and to use tools like his Justice Track app to amplify their voices. Meanwhile, a shadow loomed at the edge of the park. Officer Henry West stood with a small group of officers, their expressions a mix of skepticism and contempt as they watched the rally unfold. West had no intention of letting this event go unchecked. He was determined to disrupt it and assert that the police were not the enemy. "Look at them," West sneered, crossing his arms. "They think they can just shout us down and demand changes without considering the reality of the streets." One of the younger officers, uneasy but curious, asked, "What do you plan to do, Henry?" "We're going to show them that we're not backing down," West replied, a fierce glint in his eye. "If they want to play this game, then we'll play too. We'll remind them that we're the ones protecting this city." As the rally continued, Cooper invited community leaders and activists to the stage to share their perspectives. Each voice added to the growing chorus for change, each story a testament to the challenges faced by their community. The sense of solidarity was palpable, and Cooper felt the tide shifting in their favor. After several impactful speeches, Cooper took a moment to recognize the officers who stood with integrity and sought to protect the community. "This isn't about attacking good officers," he emphasized. "It's about holding accountable those who misuse their power. We can build a better relationship between the police and the community if we work together." The crowd responded with enthusiastic cheers, a testament to their collective desire for meaningful change. But at that moment, West decided it was time to make his presence felt. He motioned to his fellow officers, and they began to move toward the stage, determined to confront Cooper head-on. "Hey, what's going on here?" West shouted, cutting through the cheers and applause, his voice filled with authority. The crowd quieted, confusion and surprise etched on their faces as they turned to see the officers approaching. "This is a police-free zone," West declared, stepping forward. "You can't just gather and shout slurs against the police without repercussions." Cooper stepped down from the stage, meeting West's gaze with unwavering resolve. "This is a peaceful rally advocating for justice. No one is shouting slurs against the police. We're demanding accountability." West scoffed, dismissing Cooper's words with a wave of his hand. "You're stirring the pot, Turner. All this is going to do is create more division. People need to understand that law enforcement is here to protect them, not to be scapegoated." The crowd began to murmur, tension rising in the air. Some stepped forward, ready to defend Cooper, while others appeared uncertain, caught between the two sides. "This isn't about you, West," a voice from the crowd shouted. "This is about all of us who have been victimized and unheard. We have a right to voice our concerns." West's eyes narrowed as he scanned the faces in the crowd. "And what about the rights of the officers who put their lives on the line every day? You're all too quick to forget that." Just then, a community leader, Melissa Santos, stepped forward, advocating for calm. "We're here to discuss solutions, not to escalate tensions. We want to work with you to build trust, Officer West, but we cannot do that if you approach us with hostility." Cooper nodded in agreement. "This is an opportunity for dialogue, West. We want to include police officers who genuinely want to serve and protect. We need your partnership, not your resistance." For a moment, the crowd held its breath, the tension palpable. West's posture relaxed slightly as he considered Cooper's words, but his frustration was evident. "Maybe," he said begrudgingly, "but that doesn't mean we'll let this rally undermine our authority. If you want to talk about accountability, then let's do it without trying to demonize the police." Cooper took a step closer, his voice steady. "We need to come together as a community, police and citizens alike. It's not about demonizing. It's about healing and understanding. Let's open a dialogue instead of shutting each other down." The tension in the air began to shift as people from both sides hesitantly nodded. Cooper's sincerity resonated with some of the officers, and West found himself reluctantly acknowledging that there was merit in Cooper's argument. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, sensing a potential breakthrough. As the rally continued, discussions unfolded that evening about the future of the police-community relationship. The tension simmered, but there was also a flicker of hope that cooperation might be possible. As the sun set, casting a golden hue over the park, Cooper looked out at the crowd, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The day had been tumultuous, but it had also demonstrated the power of unity and the potential for progress. Yet, deep within the shadows, West and his allies continued to plot their next move. They were unwilling to accept defeat, and as the night fell, their determination only grew stronger. In the days that followed, Cooper's team received mixed feedback regarding the rally. While many praised the peaceful dialogue, others criticized the police's presence and the confrontation with West. Cooper knew that the road ahead would be fraught with obstacles, but he remained committed to the cause. The community's response to the rally reaffirmed his belief in the power of collective action, and he vowed to continue pushing for reforms that would foster trust between law enforcement and the citizens they served. As Cooper prepared for the next phase of his campaign, he understood that true change wouldn't come easily. It would require persistence, courage, and a willingness to engage in uncomfortable conversations. But with the support of the community behind him, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Little did he know that the escalating conflict with West would soon erupt into a battle that would test the very foundations of their city, a confrontation that would challenge the ideals of justice, accountability, and the power of a united community. The reckoning. As the days turned into weeks following the rally, the air in the city crackled with tension. Cooper Turner had become a polarizing figure, celebrated by many for his courageous stance against systemic injustice, yet equally reviled by a faction of law enforcement and their supporters who felt threatened by the changes he sought to implement. In the wake of the rally, Cooper's team worked tirelessly to organize meetings with community leaders, city officials, and police representatives to discuss actionable reforms. The momentum was palpable. It felt as though the city was on the brink of a transformation that could reshape the relationship between its citizens and law enforcement. However, lurking in the shadows was Officer Henry West, whose resentment had festered since the rally. He had retreated from the public eye, but was far from passive. Behind closed doors, he convened with a small group of officers who shared his views. They discussed tactics to undermine Cooper's influence and dismissed the calls for reform as unwarranted. "We can't let this millionaire dictate how we do our jobs," West asserted during one of their clandestine meetings in a dimly lit bar. "If we don't fight back, we're giving up everything we've worked for." One officer chimed in, "What do you propose? We can't just ignore what's happening out there. People are listening to him." West leaned in closer, his voice low and urgent. "We need to show the community that they can't just tear down the police without consequences. If they think they can just waltz in here and demand changes, we'll give them something to think about." As he plotted behind the scenes, Cooper continued to garner support. He had received numerous messages from citizens inspired by his vision, eager to join the fight for accountability and justice. He hosted community forums where residents shared their experiences with law enforcement, and each story reinforced the urgency of his mission. One evening, after a particularly impactful forum, Cooper sat down with his team to discuss their next steps. "We need to keep the conversation going," he stated, looking around the room at Rita, Michael, and a few community leaders. "Let's create an outreach program that teaches citizens about their rights when interacting with the police. Knowledge is power." Rita nodded enthusiastically. "We could hold workshops in schools, community centers, anywhere people gather. We can teach them how to document incidents and how to use Justice Track effectively." Michael added, "And we should engage with the police department too. If we can get them involved in these workshops, it could help build bridges." As plans began to take shape, Cooper felt hopeful about the potential for change. But beneath the surface, the atmosphere remained fraught with tension. West and his group were not idle. They were secretly gathering information on Cooper and his supporters, hoping to find a way to discredit them. One evening, as Cooper prepared to leave the office, he received an anonymous tip via email. The subject line read, "Danger at the next forum." Intrigued yet wary, Cooper opened the message. It contained a warning about an organized effort by West and other officers to disrupt the upcoming forum, potentially leading to a confrontation. The email suggested that they planned to infiltrate the meeting to instigate chaos and paint Cooper as a radical instigator. Cooper's heart raced as he absorbed the implications. "Rita, look at this," he called, forwarding the email to her. "We need to take this seriously." Rita's expression shifted from curiosity to alarm as she read the contents. "This is serious. We need to notify the venue and the police about the possible threat. We can't let them derail this forum." As they coordinated a plan to ensure security, Cooper's mind raced with the potential fallout. He knew that any confrontation could escalate tensions and ultimately derail their efforts for meaningful change. But he also recognized that they couldn't back down. To do so would embolden West and his faction. On the day of the forum, Cooper arrived early at the community center, where the meeting was set to take place. He surveyed the space, ensuring that everything was in order. Community members began to gather, filling the room with a sense of anticipation. As the time for the forum drew closer, Cooper took a deep breath, preparing himself to address the crowd. He knew that their discussions could be pivotal in shaping the future of the movement. Rita joined him moments before the forum began, her eyes scanning the room. "I spoke to the venue staff, and they're on alert. We've arranged for extra security just in case." "Good," Cooper replied, feeling a mix of gratitude and anxiety. "Let's just hope it doesn't come to that." As the forum commenced, Cooper welcomed attendees, emphasizing the importance of community engagement and collaboration. He spoke passionately about their shared mission, encouraging everyone to share their stories and experiences. However, just as the forum was gaining momentum, a group of men, members of West's faction, entered the room. They moved to the back, their presence immediately noticeable. Tension rippled through the crowd as whispers spread. Cooper caught sight of West among them, his posture rigid and defiant. The moment felt charged, and Cooper's heart raced. He continued with his presentation, but the unease in the room grew. When a community member began sharing a particularly emotional story about their experiences with the police, West's group started to interject with mocking laughter and derogatory comments. The atmosphere shifted as attendees looked back and forth, unsure of how to react. "Hey, this is not the place for your antics," Rita shouted, stepping forward to confront them. "This is a safe space for everyone to share their experiences." West raised an eyebrow, a smirk spreading across his face. "What? We can't handle a little disagreement? You want to silence us now?" Cooper stepped in, trying to diffuse the situation. "This is about having a constructive dialogue. We're here to listen and learn from each other, not to argue." But the tension escalated as more voices rose from West's group, drowning out the attendees' stories. Cooper realized that the situation was quickly spiraling out of control. "Enough," he shouted, raising his voice over the din. "This isn't a game. We're here to address real issues that affect our community. If you can't respect that, then you're not welcome here." The room fell silent for a moment, shocked by Cooper's forceful response. But it was clear that West and his supporters were unwilling to back down. "You think you can just come in here and play the victim?" West shot back, anger flaring in his voice. "You're the one causing division." Cooper felt his pulse quicken, the weight of the moment heavy on his shoulders. "No, I'm fighting for a community that has suffered for too long. We all deserve to feel safe and heard, and I won't let you undermine that." Just then, a loud crash echoed through the room as one of West's supporters knocked over a chair in protest. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and chaos erupted. Attendees began shouting, some moving to the exits, while others stood their ground, unwilling to be intimidated. Rita grabbed Cooper's arm, pulling him aside. "We need to get everyone out of here. This could turn violent." But Cooper shook his head, his expression resolute. "No, we can't let them win. We're not going to let fear dictate our actions." With newfound determination, Cooper turned back to the crowd. "Everyone, listen to me. We've come too far to let this moment define us. Stay calm, and remember why we're here. This is about justice, and we will not be silenced." His voice resonated through the chaos, momentarily cutting through the turmoil. People began to refocus, rallying around Cooper's words. "Let's show them that we stand united," he continued, his passion igniting a spark in the crowd. "We will not let fear or intimidation stop us from seeking the change we deserve." As the crowd began to chant, "Justice, unity, change," the atmosphere shifted. West's supporters looked uncertain, their bravado wavering in the face of the community's solidarity. In that moment, Cooper understood the power of resilience. The rallying cry from the crowd was a testament to their collective strength. Even in the face of confrontation, they were willing to stand together for a cause that transcended individual grievances. However, West's group, feeling cornered, quickly regrouped. "You think this is over?" West shouted, his voice filled with anger. "You'll regret this." With that, they stormed out of the community center, leaving behind a shaken but determined crowd. Cooper took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. The confrontation had been intense, but it had also illuminated the urgency of their mission. As the forum concluded, Cooper addressed the remaining attendees, who looked to him for guidance. "Today showed us that we have a long road ahead, but we must remain steadfast in our commitment to justice. We will not be intimidated or silenced." The crowd erupted into applause, a powerful display of solidarity and resolve. Cooper felt a surge of hope and determination as he realized that even in the face of adversity, they were growing stronger. But the clash with West had also revealed the deep divisions within the city, a schism that would not be easily bridged. The events of that night would serve as a catalyst for the escalating conflict between Cooper's movement and the police faction that West represented. As Cooper left the community center, he knew that the struggle was far from over. The fight for justice would require unwavering commitment and courage, but he felt empowered by the community's turning tide. The aftermath of the community forum echoed through the city like a shockwave, igniting a fervor among both supporters and detractors of Cooper Turner's movement for justice. News outlets covered the incident extensively, and videos of the confrontation went viral, sparking heated discussions online. The images of Cooper rallying the crowd against Officer West's disruptive group became emblematic of the struggle for accountability and change. In the days following the chaotic forum, Cooper and his team received a barrage of messages, some supportive, others threatening. Yet, amidst the noise, a remarkable shift began to take shape within the community. People who had previously been indifferent to the issues Cooper raised were now engaging in discussions about police reform and the importance of accountability. Feeling the momentum, Cooper organized a follow-up meeting with local leaders, activists, and residents to discuss their next steps. The community center, once a place for fear and division, now served as a beacon of hope. As the sun streamed through the large windows, casting warm light across the room, Cooper addressed the gathering. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice filled with determination. "What happened at the last forum was unacceptable, but it also showed us something powerful. When we stand together, we can't be silenced. This movement is about all of us, and we must continue pushing forward." The crowd nodded in agreement, their energy palpable. They shared ideas for upcoming events, brainstorming ways to further educate the public and engage with law enforcement in constructive dialogue. Cooper suggested hosting a series of workshops aimed at fostering understanding between police officers and community members. "We need to humanize each other's experiences," he emphasized. "If we can bridge the gap between the police and the community, we can create real change." As plans solidified for the workshops, Cooper also felt the need to directly address the police department. Despite the tension with West and his faction, he believed that not all officers shared their views. If they could engage with those who wanted to support change, perhaps they could create a new narrative around policing in their city. "Let's reach out to the police chief and propose an open forum," Cooper suggested. "A place where we can discuss these issues directly and address misconceptions on both sides." Rita looked thoughtful. "That could be a good idea, but we need to be careful. If West is involved, it might backfire." Cooper nodded, aware of the delicate balance they needed to maintain. "We'll ensure the focus is on constructive dialogue. If West wants to disrupt that, we'll be prepared." In the days leading up to the workshops, Cooper and his team worked tirelessly to promote the events. Flyers were distributed, social media campaigns launched, and local influencers were engaged to spread the word. The community buzzed with excitement as anticipation grew for the opportunity to discuss their concerns and aspirations in a safe space. On the day of the first workshop, The turnout exceeded expectations. Community members of all ages filled the room, eager to engage in discussions about their rights and responsibilities during police interactions. Cooper felt a swell of pride as he looked around at the diverse group gathered to take a stand for change. As the workshop began, Cooper introduced a panel of speakers that included community leaders, activists, and even a few police officers who supported the movement. "We're here to create understanding and find common ground," he stated. "Our goal is to build a safer, more inclusive community for everyone." One of the officers on the panel, Officer Michelle Rodriguez, stepped forward. "I'm proud to be here today. There are many of us in the department who understand the need for reform and want to work with the community. We're not all like West. We want to help build trust." Her words resonated with the audience, and Cooper watched as conversations began to spark. Participants shared their experiences, discussing the importance of having police who were approachable and willing to listen. The atmosphere transformed from one of hostility to one of collaboration. As the workshop progressed, Cooper felt a renewed sense of hope. This was what he had envisioned, a community coming together to foster understanding and build a better future. The discussions were often emotional, with many participants sharing their stories of fear, pain, and resilience in the face of racial profiling. But outside the workshop, tensions brewed. Officer West was not blind to the momentum Cooper had gained. He viewed the workshops as a threat to his authority and influence within the police department. Determined to derail Cooper's efforts, he met with a small group of officers who shared his views, plotting their next move. "We can't let him gain any more ground," West insisted, his frustration palpable. "We need to show the public that they can't trust him or his supporters." As they brainstormed strategies, West proposed a series of counter-campaigns to undermine Cooper's credibility. "Let's organize our own events, put out flyers, and start gathering our own stories. We'll paint Cooper as a radical who doesn't care about the safety of this city." His colleagues hesitated but ultimately nodded, driven by a mixture of fear and solidarity. They began spreading rumors and misinformation, hoping to discredit Cooper's movement and sway public opinion back in favor of the police department. Back at the workshops, Cooper remained focused on the positive. After several successful sessions, they began to see tangible results. Participants were empowered, equipped with knowledge about their rights, and inspired to use Justice Track to document their experiences. The atmosphere of collaboration extended beyond the workshops, as community members began to organize their own initiatives to promote accountability. Yet Cooper knew they were still facing significant resistance. The tension between his movement and West's faction grew palpable, each side unwilling to back down. News coverage continued to highlight the divisions, often framing the situation as a battle between a millionaire and the police. In a moment of quiet reflection, Cooper sat with Rita and Michael, contemplating the next steps. "We need to take this fight to the next level," he said, determination etched on his face. "We have to make our demands clear, not just for reform but for systemic change." Rita leaned in, her brow furrowed with concern. "But how do we ensure that the police are held accountable? We can't let this just become another empty promise." "I think it's time we escalate our efforts," Cooper replied. "We should organize a large-scale protest, something that brings national attention to our cause. If we can rally enough support, we might force the city to take action." Michael nodded, his eyes lighting up with possibility. "That could work, but we'll need to ensure it's peaceful and that we communicate clearly about our goals." Cooper smiled, feeling invigorated by the idea. "Let's set a date and start planning. We'll invite community leaders, activists, and anyone who believes in the fight for justice. We'll make it clear that we won't be silenced." As they began to outline their plans for the protest, Cooper felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was about more than just him. It was about creating a movement that would challenge the status quo and push for meaningful change. However, as the protest date approached, West and his faction intensified their efforts to undermine Cooper's credibility. They launched a coordinated campaign, targeting social media with false narratives and distorted facts designed to incite fear among the community. Despite the backlash, Cooper remained undeterred. With each passing day, he drew strength from the community's unwavering support. The momentum was building, and the upcoming protest promised to be a pivotal moment in their fight for justice. As the day approached, Cooper understood that they were on the brink of something monumental, a clash of ideals that would test their resolve and the very fabric of their community. The tide was turning, but the battle was far from over. Each side was poised for confrontation, ready to stake their claims in a struggle that would ultimately redefine justice in their city.